So I've never seen this cover before, Zelda. Yeah, it's very
What
special.
does it say? Tzedek lefanav,
Tzedek lefanav
yalech,
yalech vayasem
lederech pamav.
pamav.
What does it mean?
Tzedek, the righteous, are before you. Lefanav, lifnei, before.
Lederech pamav. What does it mean, derech pamav?
Derech, what's derech eretz
Derech,
again?
it's a road, a way.
Paves the way, maybe? The righteous? I'll find out for you. Do me a favor, who's got a phone? Do me a favor, just take a picture of that and send it to me, if you will. I'll let you know by tonight, okay? Okay, so Rodney, I'm going to have you remain standing. Alan, would you stand, please? Elaine, can you come over here by your brothers? Or actually, you know what? Let's kind of get around Mom. Come on over here. Okay. So we're going to do now what's called Kriya, the tearing of the ribbon. Remember I told you yours was going to be on the right side. Your children's ribbons are on the left, over their heart. You know children come from the heart. I'm going to ask you to repeat after me. Baruch, Atah, Adonai, Eloheinu, Melech, Ha'olam, Dayan, Ha'emet. Praised are you,
Praised are you,
Adonai our God,
Adonai our God,
the righteous judge.
the righteous judge.
Okay, you can have a seat. Okay. 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 You guys can have a seat. They're going to take care of the lowering and the vaults. Mizmor David, Adonai Rai lo echsar, Binot asher yarbitzeni al menuchot yenachaleni, Nafshi yishovev, Yancheni v'magle tzedek lema'an shemo, Gam ki chelech begitzal mavet, Lo hirara ki ata imadi, Shiftecha umishantecha hema yanachamuni. Taroch lefanai shulchan neged tzurirai. Tishanta vashemen roshi kosir vaya. Achto v'chesed yirdifoni koya mechayai v'shaveti b'veit Adonai le'orech yamim. Friends, I've chanted for you the words of our 23rd Psalm. As we face moments in life when we are in need of strength, when we are searching for comfort, oftentimes we turn to the psalmist, and so I invite you to recite these words with me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we will remember him. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we will remember him. In the opening buds and in the rebirth of spring, we will remember him. In the blueness of sky and in the warmth of summer, we will remember him. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we will remember him. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we will remember him. When we are weary and in need of strength, we will remember him. And when we are lost and sick at heart, we will remember him. When we have joys we yearn to share, we will remember him. So long as we live, he too will live, for he is now a part of us, as we remember Larry Simon. To you, Zelda, to your children, to Alan, Elaine, and Rodney, and also to Tracy and Sandy, to his sister-in-law, Penina, and to his grandchildren, Spencer, Jake, Trevor, Bradley, and Megan. To all the members of the family and to so many cherished friends, those who were able to gather here in person today, those who join us via technology, we are here together joining our hearts as we remember but also celebrate the life of your beloved Larry. Our sages in their wisdom have taught us that birth is a beginning and death a destination, and life is a journey from childhood to maturity and from youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness and often back again, from health to sickness, and back we pray to health again. From offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey, stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, and life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage to life everlasting. Larry's journey of 90 years began in 1930 in Romania, in the small town of Roscova. His name at the time, in this place, was Eliezer Shimenovich, and he was the son of Avraham and Henya. Our Larry, little Eliezer, grew up in this village which was nestled in the famed Marmaresh district. Larry and his siblings, Roji, Shoshana, Baruch, and Sarah, all of blessed memory, they grew up here too. Their parents owned and operated a small dry goods store which sold specifically to the Jewish members of the community. The Shimenovich children attended school here with both their Jewish and non-Jewish children, and they dealt with their share of anti-Semitism, but it was bearable. and young Eliezer would enjoy skiing with his friends down the hills which surrounded his village. Each morning before going to school, Larry would first attend cheder, his religious school. He'd attend those classes before his regular school classes. And he became bar mitzvah in 1943 at the small shul in Roskova. And then, life, as a 13-year-old Larry knew it, as his family knew it, life would forever change. As World War II waged on, and as the Nazi war machine accelerated, Larry and his family, along with the other Jews, were sent on rail cars to Hungary, where they were forced into a ghetto. It was here in this ghetto that Larry's youngest brother was born and died as an infant. In 1944, the Szymanowicz family was forced to march to Auschwitz, and it was here that Larry would be separated from his entire family. Now please know that statistics teach us that the average life expectancy at Auschwitz was 2 months. Larry survived Auschwitz for 5 months before being transferred to several other labor camps. There's a story that Larry would tell, and while he didn't talk much about these experiences at Auschwitz, he told me this one story yesterday, Rodney, and it really stuck with me. Your dad would describe to you that in the barracks there were somewhere between 200 and 300 kids, teens, at any given time. And regularly, the Nazis would take several prisoners out of the barracks and line them up in this area where there was something that your father would refer to as a chimney. Not a chimney that would reach upwards, but one that was actually along the ground. The Nazis would pick 10 or 12 young boys to cross over the chimney, and if they were on the other side, it meant that they would get to go onto some special work detail. And if they weren't picked, it meant that they would go to their death, to their extermination. Your dad would tell you the story that there was one occasion as the Nazis were orchestrating this horrific event. They selected their 10 or 12 young boys, and Larry was not selected. He knew that if any of the soldiers saw him trying to jump over this chimney-like structure, he would be shot on the spot. But in an instant, he sensed that he had this one moment, and he jumped over. And he survived this. Larry was liberated in April of 1945 by U.S. troops. His 90-year journey is nothing short of a miracle. And the fact that his children and his grandchildren and other generations will follow is also a miracle that they are here and present. After his liberation, he wandered and he found his way back to Romania, to his hometown, to see who, if anyone, from his family had survived. He spent time in Germany and then in Russia. Eventually, fortunately, he made his way to Israel, where he was placed in a DP camp. And keep in mind, as he's roaming throughout post-World War II Europe and then to Israel, this man is 15, 16, and 17 years old. And he is alone. And he believes that at this moment in his life, that he has no living relative, that they all had been murdered. And so, as he arrived to Israel, to this displaced persons camp, Larry was able to reunite with a handful of people from his hometown. And then, another miracle. Larry was informed by one of his landsmen, one of his hometown pals, that his two sisters, Rosie and Shoshana, were alive and living in Israel. The reunion of these three siblings must have been overwhelming and wonderful and heartbreaking, and still a miracle. Larry, along with his sister and brother-in-law, Shoshana and Sam, they decided to make the long journey to Canada to begin yet another new chapter. Now in Canada, it was here that Eliezer Szymanowicz adopted his new name, Larry Simon. Larry had family in Canada. He was planting new roots. He was working and he was making his way. Several years passed, and Larry decided it was time to visit his sister Roji, who was still living in Israel. And before he made this trip, he was instructed by a family member that once he was in Tel Aviv, he needed to visit this lovely couple, Teresa and Ephraim Wiesel. And he did. He visited with them. And their daughter happened to come into the room. And that daughter was you, Zelda. You were barely 18 years old. And Larry was 9 years your senior. He saw you. He was smitten. And perhaps for Larry, it was love at first sight. Not so much for you, Zelda, but for Larry it was. A courtship began and love blossomed rather quickly, because the two of you decided to marry in just 1 month. And so you were married in Israel on May 28, 1958. Zelda, your lives together as husband and wife moved forward, but not in Israel. It was back in Canada. And just 1 year later in Canada, in 1959, Alan entered into your world. Cleveland beckoned you and Larry to come. And so you, your husband, and baby Alan made the move here. And again, you were surrounded by family who had made the move to Ohio years before you. You crossed the border into the United States, 8 months pregnant, and in 1962, Elaine was born. 5 years later, in 1967, Rodney entered into your lives, completing this very beautiful Simon family portrait. Zelda, 62 years. I don't know if you remember that moment where you stood under the chuppah with your beloved, exchanging the first and then the second cup of wine. And when you exchanged that second cup of wine, Zelda, someone chanted or recited the Sheva Brachot, the 7 wedding blessings. I want to tell you that it's somewhere within those blessings that the bride and groom are finally mentioned, not towards the beginning, but further into the Brachot. And they're mentioned by 2 words, Re'im Ahuvim. You know these words. Literally translated, it means loving partners. This is what the 2 of you were for more than 6 decades. Loving partners. As you traveled through life together, you also traveled the world, visiting many places, including visits back to Israel, to Acapulco, to Toronto to visit family, and of course to Florida. 25 years ago, you invested in the condo in Hallandale, a place that brought Larry and you so much joy and so many visitors. And Zelda, the 2 of you were always surrounded by many wonderful friends, so many of them here with you today. You had friends? Yes, but you were blessed with such wonderful family. Your family members, the immediate family and the extended family, everyone, including the nieces and nephews whom Larry adored. Family members were among your closest friends, and your closest friends you treated and counted as family. Life for Larry was very clear. It was family and career and Corky's and Jack's. His career spanned from Larry Simon Painting to DAL Construction and finally in 1986 to Simcon. This self-taught, self-made man built several hundreds of homes throughout Northeast Ohio. And everything he did, every cent he earned, was for the sake of his family. He worked tirelessly, and his work ethic that he demonstrated is a gift that he gave to his children and his grandchildren. A stellar work ethic. Now, when Larry took the occasional break from his career in construction, those moments were spent with you, Zelda, and with the children. There was family fun when you would visit places like Euclid Beach and Kings Island. There were the trips to the Nevele and to Disney World, and the drives to Florida in the station wagon. I'm sure those are some very interesting stories about those long drives, but these created some of the most beautiful family memories. Alan and Elaine and Rodney, as we sat together yesterday, I listened to the stories, the family lore, and I began to get a sense of not just what did he do to make a living, but much more important, What did he do to make a life? As we spoke, one word kept rising up. Do you remember? The word was selfless. Selfless. He was selfless. How beautiful that 3 adult children, 3 siblings came up with this word. They agreed that this was the word to describe their father. He was a man who survived unspeakable horrors and a man who lost half of his immediate family. He was a man who could have, and he had every right to live his life with anger and resentment. He was a man who could have been very bitter. He was a man who could have been selfish. But those who truly knew him, they knew him as one who was selfless. And in describing your dad, the 3 of you also stated numerous times that when it came to your mom, your father was there. He was ever present, always there, and he lived to take care of her. He was her everything. You saw between them this re'im ahuvim, this loving partnership, these loving partners. And so, with your father's passing, through tears and through the heaviest of hearts, you have to say goodbye to a dad and a patriarch. And today, the world weeps with you as the Jewish people and all humanity has to say shalom to one of our last survivors, to one of our last witnesses of the Shoah. I have to share with you the words today of a poet, Hannah Senesh, one of the greatest beloved poets of Israel. She was a Hungarian freedom fighter in her teens. She became a Zionist. She escaped the Nazis and found her way to Israel. But after just a few years there, she was selected to be one of just 7 to parachute behind enemy lines into Yugoslavia to make her way to Hungary to hopefully rescue more Jews living in Hungary. She was captured and she was killed. But her words, I think, are very special and important today. Hannah Senesh wrote, Yesh kochavim she'oram magia arza, rak kasher hem atzmam avdu ve'enam. These words tell us that when we look into the sky, we see stars whose light are shining, even though we're taught that the stars themselves are gone. And her words remind us that even though there are loved ones, when they leave us here, when they leave this earth, that their light is never diminished. Their light is always shining on the ones who knew them and loved them. So while he may be gone from this earth, his light has not diminished, and his light will always be shining on you. Larry's life knew dark times, but the brightest lights in his life far outshone any darkness or shadows. Zelda and his children and his extended family and his dearest friends all added beautiful light and color to Larry's life. But his greatest nachas, the 5 brightest jewels in his crown, were of course Spencer, Jake, Trevor, Bradley, and Megan. In the words of Larry's daughter-in-law, Tracy, you said, he lived and breathed for those kids. Saba doted on them and they could do no wrong. And Tracy, you also observed that as each year passed, as each grandchild entered into this world, and as each of them moved through childhood to teenage years, into young adulthood, each year you said that you saw your father-in-law smiling more. He would laugh more. You saw that having grandchildren changed this man and his life in ways that are just immeasurable, in ways that were only for the better. And to his grandchildren, whether you were seeing him in Cleveland or Florida, you 5 are blessed with amazing memories, moments, and stories. As young children, Saba would toss a few of you in the way back of his station wagon, and he'd drive you to Chuck E. Cheese. The whole ride you'd be rolling around like little puppy dogs because there were no seat belts. Your mothers were very pleased about that. You also knew a grandfather who, to some, might have appeared to have a tough exterior, but the 5 of you knew the real truth. Your Saba was the biggest, warmest teddy bear who had the biggest belly laugh and told the funniest jokes. And there were the many visits to Florida to visit your grandparents. When you were there, one of your greatest accomplishments, whether it was as a group or individually, was to coax or drag Saba to the pool. In more recent years, if you were down there visiting and you decided to go out for the evening, perhaps to a club, when you returned to the condo, you would return to find Saba waiting for you, awake, in his chair, arms crossed, watching Fox News. He could not sleep until he knew that you were back safe and sound. And here in Cleveland, nothing gave Saba more joy and excitement than the anticipation of one of you coming over to visit. He would watch through the front window and would be so excited to welcome you, greeting you with a hug and a nosh, usually some sliced salami. And of course you all knew about the telephones, not one, maybe two, sometimes three telephones in one room. God forbid you should call and he wasn't right next to a phone. He would try not to call you because he would say he didn't want to bother you. But when one of you called him, with all those phones, he could usually answer on the first ring. And speaking of those phone calls that Saba loved so much with his grandchildren, he had a rather peculiar way of ending the calls. Not with a goodbye, not with a talk to you later. When Saba felt the conversation was over, he would just say, okay, click. You knew your Saba to be a creature of habit. He read the daily paper each and every day, cover to cover. He did his crossword puzzles. And the only thing in his home that was off limits to Megan, Bradley, Trevor, Jake, or Spencer, the only thing that was off limits was his desk. As you described, I believe Trevor said, organized chaos. His desk was his headquarters, or Simon Central. Don't touch anything on his desk. It was a mess, and he knew where everything was, where it went, and where to find it. I know that the five of you understand the gift you've been given. You had the best Saba, and he was blessed to watch you grow up. And in these last difficult days, all of you were here, with him and surrounding him in love. You go forth now carrying on his stories, his mannerisms, his legacy, and remembering that every time you would say to your Saba, I love you, he would respond always with, I love you more. Larry Simon was, in the words of his children and grandchildren, a great man. He was a devoted husband and loving partner to you, Zelda, for 62 years, a dedicated father and father-in-law, a Saba who absolutely adored his grandchildren, and he was an especially devoted, caring, and loving brother to Shoshana and Roji, both of blessed memory. Today we join with the sages of our people as we declare Zichron Livracha. We pray that the memory of Larry Simon and the good deeds he performed in the land of the living, that these will always be for a blessing. And to this we say, Amen. Our tradition teaches us that words which come from the heart enter directly to the heart. His children now rise up to bless him. I'd like to call first on his son, Alan.
Hello, I want to thank everybody for coming. That story that Kathy just said about how my dad used to hang up, I forgot all about that. But what you don't realize is that you had it better than I did, the fact that he said okay and hung up. I would be in the middle of a conversation and I hear click. And I'm like, oh, well, okay. Sometimes I pretend to continue so my friends wouldn't think, he was crazy. I guess he was done. So I'm going to tell a few stories of growing up with me and my dad, but they exemplify what kind of person he was. When I was a young boy, I loved baseball, I loved the Indians, and I'd want to go to the games. Now you have to understand, my dad coming from Europe, he had no idea what baseball was, how it was played, the Browns, football, nothing. He would ask when I came home who won, but I'm sure he didn't care. I could have said anybody. But yeah, growing up, there would be like ball day, bat day, helmet day, and I always said, "Oh, take me, I want to go," and he would take me. And you got to understand, this was the old Memorial Stadium where we sat there. It was usually behind a pole where you couldn't see half the game. And there were double headers on a Sunday afternoon in the heat. And he sat there with me and never complained. We went to a lot of games. He never complained once. On the other hand, now I realize I can't even sit through a whole game, and I would never attempt a doubleheader. I don't have the patience. So later on, I moved to Dallas. This was in the 90s. My dad was much older at this time, and the Indians had a brand new stadium, Jacobs Field. It was, ahead of its time at that time. They had a great team. They sold out 455 games in a row, spanning 7 years. So, of course, I wanted to go to see this. So I came home to visit one time, and I'm like, Dad, any way you could get tickets for a game, which were impossible to get. Somehow we got 2 tickets, I think from a banker friend, and we went to the game. We're looking at the tickets. Somewhere, it was upper deck, but behind home plate. Okay. So we get there. We're walking up ramps, walking. Turns out the tickets were in the last row. So we sat there, again, with the cold Lake Erie breeze at our back, and, everything looks like dots on the field, and he never complained. Never complained. And I was happy, to go there. And I just want to say thank you, Dad. I mean, that's the way he showed his love, and that's the way he showed, what he would do anything for his kids and his friends. Thank you.
My father, my dad, my hero. He wasn't your typical father. He didn't play ball with us in the backyard. Oh, sorry. He didn't come to my high school tennis matches or encourage me to participate in school activities, but what he did do was show me how to work hard. That's really all he did, was work, but not in a bad way. Growing up in South Euclid and then Beechwood, my dad didn't have any hobbies like my friends' dads. No fishing, no golf, no tennis, no skiing, nothing. Just work and family. Just providing for his wife and kids. That's about it. He loved spending time with the family, whether it was driving to Toronto to visit his sister Shoshana, or here in Cleveland with Rosie, or with my mom's many siblings and all their kids and his nieces and nephews. Growing up, we were always surrounded by aunts and uncles and all of our cousins. My dad loved all of them, and they all loved him. My dad was the most generous, kind, caring, selfless man, never needing or wanting anything for himself, only for my mom and me and my brothers, until the grandchildren came along. Then they took over the last 26 years. That's who we lived for. The last 10 or so years, he would sit on his couch, like Kathy said, with his arms crossed, looking out the front window, waiting for one of his grandchildren to pull up. Sometimes he would be disappointed if it was me, but then he figured I was better than nobody. I'm so glad that me and my kids were able to spend countless Christmas and spring vacations over the last 25 years down in Florida with my mom and dad. They will always have these memories forever. So will I. I will never forget you, Dad, and everything you've done for me. I'm your favorite daughter. I know it. And you'll always be my favorite dad. You rest now. You've earned it.
Unfortunately, Alan and Elaine, Dad did come to a few of my events. But I was the baby, so I guess that's okay. But yeah, that whole click hang up, my friends still talk about that today, and they're 53 and 54 years old. My dad was notorious. Rodney home? No. Click. I had a lot of wonderful stories to talk about with my dad, but again, as we discussed yesterday with Cantor-Sibo. Elaine brought it up. He was selfless. So this is about you, Dad. He was truly a selfless guy. He was a survivor, not just a Holocaust survivor. He did everything for us and nothing for himself. Again, like Elaine said, and I'm going to repeat myself. No golf, no fishing, no tennis, nothing. He just worked. It seemed like he was working 24 hours a day when we were growing up. It really did, and I think he did. He would leave the house, not even say goodbye to anybody. He would have a meeting with a tradesman. He would have a meeting with a buyer, a real estate agent, whatever it was. He just took off. I did the same thing in the beginning of marriage, and Tracy goes, no, you gotta say goodbye when you leave. When I was little, and all 5 of us would be in the station wagon, and I don't know, I probably was rolling in the back then too, or Alan or Elaine. We were driving home from wherever we were. We had to check on the jobs. Sava needed to drive by. My dad needed to drive by the house. Who knew what we were looking at? But that was his work ethic. And I did the same thing to my family. We'd be driving somewhere. I'd be building in the area. I'd go 10 minutes out of the way. We got to go, because that's what he taught me. You just always have to keep working. We never knew how hard it was for him to take off work and take those vacations that we took. We didn't take tons of them, but he did what he could, and he took us places, and he had to leave the job, and thankfully he had a partner at home, his brother-in-law, and he took off work to spend time with us. And he did everything again for us. He was a great home builder, and many of you know that. He built some of your homes out there. He built hundreds of them. Everybody liked my dad. I learned that when I went. I had the honor to work with him, and it was the first thing I learned when I went to work with him. Everywhere we went, every supplier, every vendor, every trade, they liked him. They really, really liked him because he was so interested in their life, and he talked to them. He found out what they were interested in. He would have conversations with them. He was just that guy. Better than a home builder, though. He built this family. I'm so lucky. I have 2 wonderful siblings. I have a mom who he took care of forever, and he would continue today to take care of if he could. He had a dream to come to America and build something for himself, and he did it. He built this family. That was his pride and joy. Some people will measure success on cars, houses, whatever it is, bank accounts. My dad's success is measured on us, the 5 of us that we have, and then his grandchildren. Like you've heard up here many times over the last few minutes, it was all about them at this point. He always wanted to take care of my mother until the end of August. She would have a doctor's appointment. He would insist on taking her. This man should not have been driving, but he would insist. He had to take my mommy. He always had to take care of her. Over the last 10 years or so, a lot of mine and my dad's conversations transitioned from work-related items, transferred all over to the grandkids. He couldn't care anything what I was doing at work. He wanted to know what those 5 kids were doing. Not just my 3, Spencer and Trevor as well. He just needed to know. He wanted to be part of their life. He wasn't the grandfather that was going to their baseball games or football games, anything like that. It's hard for him to walk. But he wanted to be part of their life, and he was. He made sure we were all close, never turning down a dinner for various reasons, but never turning down a dinner, and he always wanted to make sure. Elaine and the kids coming? Is Alan coming? Always. He always wanted us to be together. Growing up, I remember the Sunday night cookouts with family, and Rosie was always there. Rosie and Dolphy were always there. He had to be by family. I do the same thing. I always want my siblings there as well. I owe my father a lot. He never sat me down and gave me that corny speech, how to be a man, what to do. He just wasn't that guy. He wasn't going to have that conversation with you. He led by example. He really did. He just taught me how to be a man, but yet never had to say anything. He worked so hard that I just wanted to work as hard as him. He just kept working, so that's what I did. I thought that's what you had to do. Because I was just envious of him. Everybody knows I just came out of college, and I wanted to work with my dad. And that's what I did, and he taught me that. We had a lot of talks over the years that my mom doesn't know about, and my wife during the last recession. He had been through it. He had been through recessions. He had seen it. He had been there, and he gave me advice, and he talked me off the ledge. Those were conversations he and I would have, and I cherish those. He was always worried about us. He just worried about us, never about himself. He just worried about me, Alan, Elaine, and the kids. He was a great brother to my two aunts. My mom said it yesterday. He was a devoted brother to his sisters. He would do anything for them. He took care of my aunt till literally the day she passed away. And he taught me this. And I'm hoping to be as good as a sibling to my siblings as my dad was to his. He really, really loved his sisters. He made sure the condo we bought in Florida was, a couple floors above Tantashana. Many of you know Tantashana. He just did it, I just feel, because he just wanted us to be with her son and her grandkids. He just wanted us to be together. It was all about family with this man. He always told us the condo was for his kids. I don't know if he meant for us or his grandkids. That I never got over. My mom thinks it was for her, but I can definitely tell you it wasn't for her. His nieces and nephews on my mom's side, he adored all of them. He really did. Norman, he enjoyed your visits. I know you're here somewhere with your boys. He always told me when you would come over. He really enjoyed those visits. Esther and Marvin would come in town, and he was excited. Donnie would come from Israel. I'm not even sure Donnie was married to Rachel. I don't even remember. But he was so excited to see Donnie. It was like it was his own side of the family. And then the last few years, spending Thanksgiving with the Wiesel side of the family, Herbie and Lori and the kids, and Talia and Panina. And he just cherished those days. He sat there and smiled at all of you guys. He just really, really did. My cousin Alan in Canada, I know you called him a lot. I know you guys talked. He also used to wait for you to call too. Don't fool yourself, Alan. I know you can't be here, but I know you're watching this. He really enjoyed talking to you and seeing you. He certainly taught me how to be a great dad. Not by taking me to sporting events, not by taking me fishing or teaching me golf. But he always taught me to be there for your kids, because he was always there for me. He's always there for Elaine. He was always there for Alan. Taught me how to be a great husband. Not by showering my wife with gifts and bringing home flowers, but always taking care of your wife. Because he always took care of my mom. Literally, he told his passing, he was taking care of my mom. He always made sure she was taken care of. My father was the best. I can't thank him enough for everything he did for all of us. Being there, always wanting the best for his family. He came to this country with a dream to have a great, big, happy family. Jake, Bradley, Megan, Spencer, Trevor. You were the highlight. You were the apple of his eye. As well, you should be. He loved all of us. Dad, your dream came true. You built a family. You built a life. You made something of yourself. You did it. And I love you for that, Dad. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, Rodney. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, dayan ha'emet. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, creator of the universe, the righteous judge. Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach, yehi shem Adonai mevarach. God has given, and now God has taken away. Still, we bless the name of God. Friends, in a moment I will chant for you the words of El Molyrach, the memorial prayer. Following the chanting of this prayer, those of you who wish to take part in our tradition of placing earth on the casket, we will be invited to do so. We're taught that when we come into this world, there are loving hands to care for us and guide us. And also when we leave this world, it should not be done in the hands of strangers, but rather in the hands of those who knew us and loved us. This tradition, though, we have to treat very cautiously in this time, during this period that we're all making our way through. So when it is time to place earth, those of you who wish to, you can either use your bare hand and pick up some earth and place it on the casket, or if you wish to shovel, we have disposable gloves so that no one's hands, the shovel won't be passed from hand to hand. After you've placed the earth, our tradition is that you put the shovel back into the pile of earth. You don't pass it on to another person. At this time, as you're able, I invite you to rise for El Molyrach, the memorial prayer. El Molyrach, shochen bamromim, hamse menuchan, nechona tachat kanfech hashchina, במעלות קדושים ותורים כזוהר הרקיע מסעירים. את נשמת אליעזר בן אברהם יצחק וחניה, שהלך לעולמו בגן עדן תחם מנוחתו. ענה ברחמים אסתירהו בסתר כנפך לעולמים, ותרור בתור חיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום. Amen. O God, exalted and full of compassion, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure, to the soul of Larry Simon, Eliezer ben Avram Yitzchak Vehenya, to Larry who has gone now to his eternal home. God of mercy, we beseech you to remember all the worthy and righteous deeds that he performed in the land of the living. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. God is his portion. May he rest in peace. And together we say, Amen. Vayashov hafar al haaretz k'shachaya v'haruach teshuv el ha'elohim asher natana. The dust returns to the earth as it was, but the spirit returns unto God who gave it. May the soul of Larry Simon be bound up in the bond of life eternal. Friends, after we have finished placing the earth and filling the grave, I'll ask that you remain standing as we conclude with the Kaddish. Once the immediate family has taken part in this mitzvah, we'll have the rest of you take part, but please just keep your distance between each family. Thank you. Two of my 4 kids are here.
Everybody loves it.
Friends, let's join together in the words of our Kaddish as we say together. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'alma divra chirutei v'amlich malchutei, b'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kariv v'yamru. Amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mivarach le'olam olamei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal shmei d'kurusha barichu. La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, damiran bi'alma v'yimru. Amen. Yehei shalom ha'rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru. Amen. We pray that God, who makes peace in a high place, bring peace and comfort to you, the mourners, to Israel, and to all humankind. And to this we say, Amen. Friends, before you continue on your way, the family has asked me to share with you, if anyone wishes to make a contribution in memory of Larry, that you might consider the Kol Israel Foundation. Sadly, we know there is no Shiva, but when the family is ready, I know that you will find a way to safely reach out to them. As you've come here in peace today, so may you go forth in peace.
If you'll kindly make a path, please, 2 aisles in this direction for the family return to their bodies.